Me and Loki are here at a trail about 5 minutes from my house. We're excited to talk with you this morning about why the name is Desert Tree and this journey that God's brought me through to overcome trauma and difficulty. And I look forward to sharing with you some of the lessons that I've learned and also showing you this beautiful area. A lot of you on the East and West Coast have never been to the Midwest. Maybe you've been to Europe, but not the Midwest. I invite you to come check it out. We have rivers and lakes and creeks and woods and all kinds of beautiful trees, especially right now. Fall foliage is about to start. So I'm excited to walk with you today. It's raining a little bit, which is perfect. And so come on, let's have some fun together. I just want you guys to see what we're opening up into here. I actually played in these woods as a kid. One of my best friends lived right over there, and so we just had so much fun going on adventures together, jumping into the woods and looking for crawdads and turtles and snakes and all kinds of things. One of the things that God did in my life as a part of my recovery is He put me back in my hometown, in my home neighborhood, and reminded me who I was before I ever met girls, before I ever even knew girls existed, even before I played sports and started thinking about job and career and all that stuff. I played in the woods. And God brought me back here to remind me who I am and that I can overcome hard things. And so I'm excited for you to see this always in the woods, in the wild, whatever you live in, whether it's desert or tropical island or woods or something else. There are natural things that can be an inspiration for you of new life. Old things die and new things come out of it. It's happening all the time. These leaves are falling. God's renewing the face of the earth with this rain. Beautiful things are happening, and all we have to do is walk our trail, walk our path. So I just want to invite you to walk that path with me this morning. Be wondering, why Desert Tree? Why this name and this image, Desert Tree, if I live in the Midwest? You may know this. I did not until I read it, that desert and wilderness is the same word in the Old Testament. So if you're stuck in the wilderness, if you're stuck in the desert, it's the same thing. It's a place of barrenness. It's a place of despair. That's what a desert is. So I don't know where you are today, where you are in your life right now, but if you're in a desert or a wilderness, you're in a good place. You're in a good place because you're in a place to meet God, especially if you know that you're in that desert. So Loki is excited to keep going, all these smells and all these sights. But I want to share with you from 1 Kings 19, because that's really where God took me when my desert started. It was about 8 years ago, and my marriage started falling apart, and I was just really seeking God. I was in this hard place of, how do I get through this? Where am I? Why is this happening? I had been in pastoral ministry for about 25 years, and I just didn't know what to do. I knew that I was about to lose my marriage, and I was really afraid. So I just want to place us in 1 Kings 19, the story of Elijah. Um, really considered by Jewish people to be the greatest prophet. There's really 6 little stories that show us his ministry, and we're really just going to focus on one of them. The context of 1 Kings 19 is that Elijah's coming off of this mountaintop experience where he saw the glory of God, and God came through and on Mount Carmel and showed that he was with him, showed that he was real and he was powerful. And what we see in 1 Kings 19:1 is it happens for Elijah. It happens in the form of Jezebel says to Elijah, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to put you to death if it's the last thing I do. And for Elijah, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was everything for him. He was just done. He was overwhelmed by the fact that he had seen the glory of God, he had seen the power of God, and he thought it was done. Like, evil's defeated, justice has come, God has come, God has made it clear, it's over, it's done with. And yet here's Jezebel saying, I'm going to kill you. I don't know what it is for you, but when it happens, maybe you had to declare bankruptcy for some reason. Maybe you lost your marriage. Maybe someone died in your life. That was just devastating. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe a Christian leader just demonstrated total hypocrisy. I don't know what it is for you. For me, it was losing my marriage. For me, it was losing my family as I understood it. And I just want to say, whatever you've experienced, it's real. I know when things fall apart, and they fell apart for Elijah. Make no mistake. I mean, this is a prophet. This is a spiritual giant. And when Jezebel said that to him, he fell apart. He fell apart. And I just want to say, wherever you are, it's okay. As long as you know that you're in a wilderness or desert, we can go from there. So we'll continue here in just a second in verse 3. Let's walk a little bit. Elijah experienced rock bottom. Rock bottom is a phrase that's used in the 12 steps, which I love. They're totally biblical, and they come out of a thoroughly Christian worldview. But, you know, that first step is acknowledging powerlessness. The first step of recovery, the first step of healing, the first step of overcoming is acknowledging that you can't do it yourself. You can't fix yourself. You cannot save yourself. I had to come to that place, like I said, even though I had been in pastoral ministry for over 25 years, where I just acknowledged to God and to a couple friends that I'm not doing well. Things have fallen apart. The train is off the tracks. And that's what happens with Elijah. He comes to this place, and it says that he's afraid. He goes to the desert and sits down under this broom tree, and he says to God, I'm ready to die. I'm no better than my ancestors. I think it's a huge acknowledgement of his powerlessness. He says, I can't do this. I'm done. I don't think he's suicidal, but he is acknowledging to God, like, I would not complain if I fell asleep tonight and did not wake up. I've been there many times in my dark night of the soul, in my year that I was really in rock bottom, and it was a full year for me. Elijah comes to this place and he says, I'm done, I'm ready to die, and I'm no better, by the way, than my ancestors. What happened in my life is I had to acknowledge that I thought I was better than that. I thought I was above despair. I thought I was above that kind of suffering and emptiness. I thought I was even better than my family. I thought I was better than my ancestors. I did a lot of work in my family tree, and I saw, a lot of brokenness, a lot of great things, perseverance, beautiful things. But I had to come to this place and say, no, I'm just a human being. I'm a human being just like everybody else, and I experience brokenness, emptiness, limits, and powerlessness. Here we are. It's September 22nd. There are football games on today. It's Sunday. We live in a football culture that does not acknowledge limits and losses. We want to take football injuries and we want to hide and we want to go to commercial break. The reality is, being a human being includes limits and losses. It includes brokenness, despair. It includes failures. And in fact, I believe that when Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, blessed are those who mourn, they will be comforted. He's talking about this first step of acknowledging limits and powerlessness. We come to that place in our pain and our suffering where God shouts to us, as C.S. Lewis says. He whispers in our pleasures. He shouts to us in our pain. And I just want to say, for me and for Elijah, he was at that place of saying, I'm done. I can't do this. That's your first step to living a great life. That's your first step to overcoming. That's your first step to persevering through this and living your best life. I just want to invite you to do what Elijah did. He said, I've had enough, Lord. We're going to see next. That's actually the place where Jesus met him in the story. Let's keep going a little bit. Check this out, guys. I think this is a great illustration of the natural life cycle right here. Look at this tree. Some people might say, what a sad story, this dead tree. Loki's checking it out. Look, these roots, they're dead. They've been pulled out of the ground. What a sad story. Maybe in your life, you've had a major tree fall down. Maybe it was your finances or your job or your career, your identity, your marriage, your hopes, your dreams. Maybe you have a dream in your life that looks like this right now. And it's time, you know what? It's time to acknowledge, look at all this life that exists now because this old tree died. This old tree is laying down, and now look, new trees are growing up. The old tree is not sucking all the nutrients away. Now the new trees can grow and live. There's all kinds of things that can come, beautiful things that can come out of this, guys. But if we sit and just focus and just grieve, and trust me, I was there. I was there, guys. No judgment. It's easy to just sit down and look at something in your life, like your marriage or your career or your finances or your home, and say, oh, I just want to focus on this. This is so sad. I want to put something here and remember it. I want to think about it every day. How sad. It is important to grieve. It's healthy to grieve. But guess what? The trail goes on. The trail goes on. You got to live it. You can't stay here and come here and make this your God. You will lose the rest of your life. You will lose your hopes and dreams. There are other trees to plant. There are other beautiful things to experience, and we can stand here and we can say, that was a great tree. That's probably, 100-year-old tree right there. It was a beautiful tree in its life. But we can let it go and we can keep walking and we can say, this is the life cycle. We can sit here and just focus this and internalize it, grieve it, or we can say, look, there's other green stuff. There's other beautiful things. Let's keep going. So let's keep going. What's amazing to me in this story is Elijah acknowledges his grief, his despair, and it says that he's afraid. I believe fear is a primary feeling. There are other things that happen, sadness, anger. There are other things, but fear really motivates a lot of us as we get stuck. Elijah got stuck. I've been stuck. I want to say, wherever you are right now, perfect love drives out fear. That's what it says in the New Testament. I believe fear and faith cannot go together. God invites us to faith rather than fear. So what happens in the story is that the pre-incarnate Jesus actually comes and meets Elijah under that tree. He meets with him. And he tells him several things that are really important. He says to him, the journey is too hard for you. I believe the journey is too hard apart from Jesus. The journey is difficult. I want to name it. Whatever you're experiencing, the journey is hard. I'll tell you something that for me has just been a struggle for 25 years is this Protestant evangelical culture of just going around and saying praise the Lord all the time in the face of struggle. Well, praise the Lord. Things are hard. Well, praise the Lord. Yes, God deserves to be praised, but we do not invalidate the struggle, the suffering. And Jesus meets Elijah and he says, the journey is too hard for you. And then he gives him a prescription. That prescription is not memorize some more scriptures and I'm going to give you this to-do list and then everything's going to be okay. No, he doesn't do that. First of all, he touches him. Touches him. Physical touch, close proximity, being comforted. And this is one thing Loki has done for me because my number one love language is physical touch and number two is quality time. Loki loves physical touch. And so he's cuddled with me many times. It's been so good. Jesus touches Elijah and then he says, you need to eat, drink water, and sleep. And he tells him 2 different times. I remember when my trauma first started, when the separation first happened, I went to one of my mentors and I said, I'm going to fast. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to lose 25 pounds. And he said, no, you're not. Now is not the time to fast. You need to eat and you need to get healthy because grief requires fuel and you need good calories. And what I learned in my grief process is that it's really easy to eat too much or to eat too little. I actually had no desire to eat in the midst of my trauma. I didn't want to go to the grocery. That just reminded me of my kids constantly. It reminded me of my family. I didn't want to spend time in the kitchen. I was by myself. The silence was deafening. It was killing me. And so this word to Elijah, I think, is so good. Jesus says, take care of your physical body first. You know, the hierarchy of needs. Take care of your physical body. And for some, sleep. You need to know sleep is even more important than nutrition. You are going to need your rest, guys. I mean, for at least a year, I took melatonin every night. I had a very disciplined sleep process of going to bed, even when it was just 3 hours a night. And I had many nights that were just 3 hours. Sleep is vital, it's not optional. You're going to need your sleep. You're going to need exercise. You're going to need to eat healthy. You're going to need to drink plenty of water. That's where the journey starts with Elijah. So Jesus says, you need to do this. You need to take care of yourself. And I say to you, friends, whether you feel like it or not, you need to eat healthy. You need to eat your fruit, your vegetables 4 times a day. You need to exercise. Even if it's just walking, listening to something encouraging. Maybe you're listening to this while you're exercising. That's good. I listen to encouraging sermons about hope. I just immersed myself in hope, uplifting music, uplifting movies. You're going to have to get the crap, the discouraging stuff, the sad stuff, get it out of your life, at least for this season. Even if that means you love country music, well, maybe you need to stop listening to country music and sad songs for a season. Maybe you need to stop watching movies that are love stories for a season. For me, I had to stop crappy Christmas TV commercials. As soon as I saw them, I had to turn them off because it was always about the perfect families and kids being cute at Christmas time. I just couldn't do it. I had to shut it down and focus on anything that built me up. All right. So Jesus meets Elijah, and I believe he wants to meet you and me. I'm very excited for the next step, though, of what he experienced. But let's walk a little bit. The rain's kicking up. It's getting nice. So what happens with Elijah next is after taking care of himself physically, it's time. It's time for his spiritual pursuit of God. I love A.W. Tozer. I named one of my kids after him, Aiden Wilson. A.W. Tozer wrote this important book in the 1940s called The Pursuit of God. He wrote it in one sitting on a train ride. Pretty amazing. But it's all about pursuing God, seeking hard after God. I just want to say, if you're in the wilderness, if you're in the desert, it's the perfect time to seek hard after God. That's what Elijah does. Elijah's name means Yahweh is God. I just want to ask you, is Yahweh your God? That's God's name, the divine name that literally means I am, I was, and I will be. Yahweh is God. So Elijah seeks hard after him. He takes off for 40 days and 40 nights to go meet with God. He's going to that place where Moses met with God in Exodus 34. He wants to hear from God. That's what he's doing. What about you? Have you sought hard after God? I know that it's easy in the midst of pain and trauma. It's easy to turn to other things, TV, movies, alcohol, drugs, other things, any kind of distraction. I know that temptation, guys, that says, I want to feel anything but this. Anything but this. That's where Elijah was, and his response to it was, I'm going to seek hard after God. I need to hear from him. So he goes 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, to Mount Sinai. He gets in a cave, and I love it. God meets him in that cave and says, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? It's really a powerful question, and I'm asking you to be honest with yourself. What are you doing here? What are you doing here on this podcast? What are you doing here at this place in your life? Some of us are living in a cave. You've checked out. And God says, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And he says to Elijah, go outside on the mountainside. Go outside. Go outside and you'll meet with me. Pretty awesome because, like I said, Elijah has been on Mount Carmel. He's seen the glory of God. He's seen the power of God. He's already seen amazing miracles. The ravens provided him food. He connected with the woman at Zarephath, and he saw God do miracles. God brought her son back from death. He has seen it, and yet God says, come out. Elijah looks, and there are these awesome things: earthquake, wind, fire. But it says God's not in those things. Elijah's used to God being in the big, awesome, majestic things. But God's not in those things in that instance. God is saying to Elijah, I'm not just transcendent. I'm not just awesome. I'm not just the great I am. I mean, in fact, he says, I will pass by. He uses the same language that he used with Moses when he showed him his glory. And Moses' face was so bright that it blinded some people. It's the same language that is used of Jesus when he was walking on water and he was about to pass by the disciples. They were terrified. God's glory is so great that all he can do is pass by. But what God is saying to Elijah is, I'm not just in the awesome and the terrifying, I'm also in the small. I'm also in the silent. I'm also in the little. He's not just some invisible God who's out there. He's not just some infinite God. We look at the stars and say, wow, 400 billion stars that are visible. That's amazing. But what's also amazing about God is that he's particularized. He's in the person and work of Jesus. God is not just the creator. He's also the little baby born into poverty. He's also localized. And it says he was in the still small voice. I wonder what he said to Elijah. I mean, I've thought about it many times. I don't know what he said. The text is not clear. Maybe he said, I love you. Maybe he said, I am. Maybe he said, I'm with you. I'll bet he said something specific to Elijah that Elijah needed to hear, that told him, this is true. He's with me. He's real. I believe he wants to speak to you. Something specific to you. See, God is not just awesome and big and majestic and sublime and amazing. He's not just that. He's also little. He cares about the little. He cares about the minute. He cares about you. He knows your name. He knows you. He sees you. He cares about you. I know that he met me in specific ways to me. And whether it was a song coming on that I needed to hear in that moment, whether it was a rainbow or a sunset that I needed to see at that exact moment. I mean, I can tell you just Loki was a miracle. You know, I prayed to God, my dog died in in the midst of my trauma, this chocolate lab. She was so sweet. And I laugh because the trauma in my life was so great that my dog dying, Molly, this beautiful chocolate lab, didn't even touch the pain that I was feeling in my life. And I just laughed and I said, God, how bad is it when your dog dies and it's just like, well, just another thing, you know, this would happen right now. So we prayed, God, please provide, make it clear what dog you want for us. And I saw this dog, I saw Loki on this rescue site. And I didn't know there was such a thing as chocolate labradoodles. I had seen golden ones and some other ones. Saw this dog, and it said that his name was Toby. And I thought, wow, that's cool. I had a dog named Toby when I was a kid, and God, would you just make it clear if you want us to have this dog? And my boys came to me, Seth and Aiden. They came to me and they said, well, we really like him, but we want to name him Loki, Dad. Can we name him Loki? And I said, yeah, we can name him Loki. That's fine. His name's Toby, and so it's the same sound. Well, would you believe we drove there near Lexington, Kentucky? Well, it's about an hour south, Hazard, Kentucky. That's now Loki's middle name, Hazard. We go in there to pick him up, and they said, well, we need to tell you something, sir. His name is actually not Toby. It's Loki. They didn't know anything about what my kids had said. God confirmed that he was with us, and he confirmed that Loki was supposed to be our dog. God does these things. He cares about the specifics. That's what he did for Elijah, and that's what he wants to do for you. He cares about your specifics, and if you allow him, he will show you by faith. It's going to require faith on your part. As one of my mentors said, you know, faith is still spelled R-I-S-K. You got to trust him. He's not going to give you everything. He's not going to show you every single thing. He'll give you a lamp to show you your next steps, and he'll invite you to step forward. But that's what happens with Elijah. He's heard from God. God meets him, and he speaks to him in a still small voice. And he says, what are you doing here? Elijah gives him his spiel, and we'll walk a little bit, and then I'll share with you what happens next. It's pretty awesome. God says something to him that I think is really hard and really powerful. God says to him, go back. Go back the way you came. Go back. He gives him some work to do. He says, anoint this person king and anoint that person king. And he tells him, you're going to have a helper now. This helper is going to be Elisha. That's an amazing story in and of itself. But he says to him, go back. And I just want to say to you, I'm not interpreting that as go back to the trauma or go back and try again. No, he's saying go forward in life. You know, it's that quote from Shawshank Redemption where Morgan Freeman's character says, you have two choices. Get busy living or get busy dying. That's it. Those are your two choices, friends. I came to that place for myself, and you know, I could still be in that place just grieving over the dead tree in my life. There are days of sadness. There are days of real grief. But I think every day God says to us, get busy living or get busy dying. And I want to live. I don't know about you, but I want to live. There is life to live. Doors close that even are hard or sad. Relationships end. My goodness, I started making sourdough bread, and in the midst of my trauma, my sourdough starter went bad. I mean, it had flies in it, as if God said, look, you want to keep this sourdough starter? I'm telling you, throw it out and start over. I want to tell you, you can start over. You can move forward. But now you're going to have wisdom that you never had before. You're going to be able to move forward. You're going to be able to live. You're going to take not these open wounds, you're going to take these scars, and you have the opportunity to use them for good in your life and this world. That's what I realized. I realized that I could either get bitter or I could get better. That may sound like a cliche, but for me, it's very real. I decided I don't want to sit around and whine and cry and just grieve and live out this funeral service for the rest of my life. I want to move forward because there's life to live. There's life to live, friends. You don't need to sit there and just be sad and chuck it in and just die and just escape. You don't need to, but nobody can do it for you. Nobody can do it for you. Only you can live your life. I have some good friends in my life, and I can't remember what book they're quoting, but it's so good for me. This is all I needed to hear, that you need to accept the fact that nobody's coming to rescue you. Nobody. There's no lawyer that's going to fix your marriage. There's no judge that's going to fix your situation. You have to fix your situation. Yes, I believe it's God's provision. It's ultimately in the person and work of Jesus. In Him we live and move and have our being. All life comes from Him. But practically speaking, listen to me, friend. You get up, rise up, and choose life. That's what He told Elijah to do. Go back. Go back. I've got work for you to do. I want to invite you, not by willpower, but by God's grace. Get up and put one foot in front of the other and move forward. In John chapter 5, Jesus encountered the man at the pool, the man who had been disabled at that pool for 37 years. And I think it's important what Jesus said to him. Do you want to get better? Do you want to get well? He gives you and me the choice as well. If you want to get better, that's what He says to this man. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. It's going to require maybe learning to walk again. It's going to require some hard steps. Elijah had to go back 40 days and 40 nights. He had to go back. It's going to be different. It's going to be hard. For me, it was really hard. I remember preaching my first sermon with no family in the congregation. I had had a wife by my side for 25 years, and getting up and going to church was hard. My identity was different. Like, it must have felt that way when David put on Saul's armor. It just felt so weird to me. But God kept saying, I'm here, and my grace is sufficient. That's what He's saying to you right now. His grace is sufficient for you. Get up and do the next right thing. It's time. It's time. All right, one more thing, but let's walk for a minute before we look at the next thing. The last thing I want to focus on from 1 Kings 19 may be even the most powerful thing. Elijah has believed, that God was awesome, but God was not sovereign, in some ways. And God met him and touched him and fed him. And then God spoke to him, not in the terrifying things, not in the gigantic things, but in the small things. Telling my story, my life story, telling my trauma story from these last, 8 years or so. People hear it and they think it's a horror story. They think it's a tragedy. And I just want to say to you, it's not a horror story. It's a redemption story. It's not a tragedy. It's a love story. It's not the love story I thought it was going to be. It's a love story between God and me. God loves me. He is my rescuer. It is a story of redemption. I'm in the middle of it. I'm not at the end of it. And that's really what's going on with Elijah here, is that God says, look, there's a lot going on that you don't know about. I want to encourage you. God is working, and He invites us to live by faith and not by sight. You remember Hebrews chapter 11. I encourage you to read it. I encourage you to memorize verse 1 and verse 6. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. We must believe that God exists, and He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. That's what faith is. Faith is being sure of that which we do not see. That's what it is. Faith is stepping out onto this little bridge and trusting that somehow it's going to hold me. I have to have faith in these engineers and these builders. It requires faith to take a step. Some of you are in very hard places. I want to invite you to trust God. Whatever that looks like. He calls us to use wisdom, but He also calls us to faith. He calls us to trust Him, and I just want to say He has never once failed me. He keeps His promises. He doesn't just make them. But it requires faith. It requires trust to be in this relationship with Him. It's going to require faith for you to overcome this. This is why we're called Desert Tree. Because this is what it means to be a human being in relationship with God. This isn't just about trauma, whether it's financial trauma or relational trauma or physical trauma. This is about being a human being in relationship with God. It's accepting this desert that we find ourselves in, and it's meeting Jesus under this tree. That's what this is, guys. This is a community. And I'm thankful for you today. I'm glad to be with you in it. So thank you for tuning in. Thanks for listening this whole time. Again, I just want to encourage you, please check out our Spotify playlist. I add songs that are inspiring, that are encouraging. Please listen in. We'll talk soon. Have a great day, guys. Glad to be with you. Come on, Loki. Let's go, Bubba.